right, welcome to spring break, March Madness, everything. Get your workouts in early, whatever.
Yeah, your workouts, your
don't work.
Get snipped, whatever you're gonna do. Yeah, it's the big snip week, right? All the guys go in and get snipped. I think I got 2 on the table this week going in and getting snipped because they're gonna be laid up during March Madness. It is that week again. Today is March 18th. The year it's 2025. Welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron podcast. This is episode 839.
Yeah, it is. It is
closer to 850, and 850 feels really close to 1,000. 839 seems like a far distant decade away, but 850 sounds like just around the corner.
Yeah, we're still about a 13 seed here.
Yeah, we see about a 13 seed. Listen, there's always a 13 seed that makes it to the Elite 8 or Sweet 16. But yeah, hopefully today after this podcast, we're your number 1 seed. But no, we'll talk. We'll finish up with a little swimming talk that we got into late last week. But yes, it's March Madness. Good luck to everyone, and with your alma maters, and for those of us who didn't graduate college, the team you rooted for growing up. It's a fun week. Everybody gets into it, and before we get into swimming, I was listening to somebody talk about how difficult it is to pick the perfect bracket, and you always see like all the chances. Like how it's like 1 in, whatever millionth of a chance or whatever. And he said, it's pretty simple. He said, you take a quarter and you flip it 64 times and you have to guess it right 64 times in a row.
Mm.
He's like, that's how hard it is to pick the perfect bracket. And I was like, that is like, yeah, I can't even wrap my brain around getting past 4. I mean, a lot of people will screw up past 2, and it's just fun I think it's fun to watch. It's great. I know a lot of people like bet and gamble and stuff like that. I don't do it. I just make a bracket because it's fun to watch these teams and cheer. And you've always got the underdogs that go far, which everyone likes cheering for, and everyone's got a homer team they cheer for. Everybody's got teams they hate that they cheer against, and then you've always kind of got those Cinderella stories where you got the seniors. Well, listen, like we won't get into this, but I was reading something today. Is like you're going to see a lot more juniors and seniors in both college football and basketball in the next few years, because we used to have like the one and done crowd, and now with NIL, they're making more money in college than they will with their first pro contract. So you're going to have people staying to like their senior year all the way through, unless they're like guaranteed a top 15. So you're going to get a lot more depth with just, I think honestly what you're seeing this year. It's such a deep tournament, so many good teams. But yeah, hopefully it's fun to watch. Good trainer time. If you're on the bike, if you want to get on the treadmill, watch a little bit, that's good. But yeah, take a little bit of time. No one's going to work basically at all Thursday and Friday of the weekend. So enjoy yourself. Hope your team wins, unless they're playing my Vols or the Badgers. And yeah, best of luck to everybody.
Yeah. I've been looking for one of those kids, those kids that solve the Rubik's Cube in like 3.9 seconds.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get a hold of one of those guys to help me pick this bracket.
Nothing to do with picking a bracket.
It's got to have something to do with the bracket.
It's a great
that
Netflix
shit makes me nervous, man.
It does. I don't know how. I mean, it'd take me a day just to do it once, like the first time.
Yeah.
And I would need like an instruction manual, because I had one. It was like move it here, and you're done. There's like these like formulas you can use to get out of every single position. And I was like, hey, I get what you're saying here. I get what you're trying to tell me to do, and I can't even do it. And then like Hayden's got friends who like carry them around in their pockets, like, hey, I got a little mini cube, like a 3 and a 4, and like, and they're done. And then 2 seconds later, they're asking you like where the pantry is, and they're standing right in front of the door. You're like,
Yeah, that's
right. You're like, you can't remember to brush your teeth. You can't do simple things. You ask like the most ridiculous questions on the planet, and then you can like tell me how to code in the computer, or tell me how to like solve in a Rubik's Cube, or do it yourself in like 2 seconds. Yeah, there's a huge discrepancy there, I think, with like common sense and logic versus like things they can just do with like those itty bitty but mighty brains.
Yeah, I think I had that talent, but it was like in Pac-Man. I knew the patterns, so I could just fake left and go right, and that kind of shit. And but yeah, it's amazing. I was wondering like, we'll get into swim in a second, but do you know a lot of? I wonder how many triathletes are like gamblers on the. Because I have several friends they're always sending me like their parlay picks and stuff for college basketball. I never, thankfully, I don't do that. You know,
I don't either.
I got a lot of issues, and that's not one of them.
I think it's not mine either. I mean, as an addict, it's like a definite no-no. But I think that's like one of the most like underground addictions on the planet.
Oh my God. And they just flaunt it now.
I mean, everything. They exploit everyone and everybody now. Every other commercial you see now is about betting and gambling. I mean, we're going to talk about swimming, I swear, but like they can gamble on everything. I don't know. There's obviously a risk. You have to have like a high risk tolerance to do that kind of stuff. But Hayden asks me all the time. He's like, hey, he's like, I'll bet you, he's like standing 10 feet from the trash can. He's like, I'll bet you $20 I make this. I'm like, first of all, like, I'll take that bet, but you ain't got 20. And if you lose, that 20 is coming from my pocket. So I'm not betting. I was like, dude, he's like, why not? I was like, cause I like my money. And he tries to ask me, like, he's like, what's the plus and minus means? I'm like, well, here it is. You're like, I bet that, we're watching a hockey game. And he's like, I bet the Winnipeg Jets beat the San Jose Sharks. And I'm like, how much you want to bet? I'm like, I mean, I don't want to bet because I bet the same thing, but there's no point in betting because the Jets are going to be heavily favored. So if you bet $5, you might win like $1.50. But then if you lose it, you lose all of it. And he's like, well, that doesn't sound very fun. I'm like, exactly. That's why I don't gamble. But yeah, honestly, I think filling out the brackets just as fun. I'm not sure if I would say most triathletes don't. I mean, I wouldn't say most. I would say the majority of triathletes, because of their nature of being borderline control freaks, wouldn't gamble. Now, I know quite a few that do, but I think for the most part, they're probably not in that part of the population that probably is heavily because they're control freaks. But
they're also chasing excitement.
That's true, and I don't even think. But they also could be like up their data with their data and like, hey, so and so's got they're more likely to win here. They got it like stretched out in their spreadsheet. They'd be
so caught up in data they'd never get around to the bet.
Exactly. They're like, oh shit, I didn't fill my bracket. I've been too busy with my spreadsheet, filling out, and it's like
exactly.
Yeah, who knows? But whatever you do, whatever the case may be, whether you're a gambler or not a gambler, we still hope you enjoy the tournament. And your thing as a kid was Pac-Man. My thing as a kid was swimming, and we wanted to finish up.
Come on, man.
What's that?
Marginalizing my youth there.
I mean, listen, mine was Contra. Up, up, down, left, right, B, A, B, to start. That was my thing. Contra was my jam, and I could do the same thing. Like, you just know what to do all the time. Yeah, everyone's got their skill, man. It's hand-eye coordination. But no, we talked a little bit about swimming on Thursday and wanted to finish up a little bit of that talk today. Again, swimming is super technical. And obviously, I think one of the biggest challenges that athletes, especially triathletes, have to say master, but at least get under control and understand what they're doing. And the only reason I wanted to bring, there was a few things we didn't mention on Thursday, but one of the main things I want to talk about today was the use of levers. I tried to post a video in the closed Facebook group, the Crushing Iron group, on yesterday, of an analysis I did over the weekend with the guy that came in. And of course, you put like an 8-minute video of like you in doing an analysis of a good swimmer and have like give Facebook like a 2-liner, and they like remove the post for whatever reason. It's not allowed. You can't educate people for swimming, but you sure as fuck can educate people with false information and say whatever you want to on regular Facebook. So whatever. I tried my public service, and Facebook said it wasn't allowed. But anyway, long story short is I was working with a 15-year-old on Sunday, and he came in with like shoulder pain, which again, I think is pretty common. It's the most common, I think, quote unquote, injury or niggle that swimmers have. They complain of shoulder issues, like on the side of their shoulder, there's just way too much, like a pinch point. It's a sharp pain or a dull pain, either while they're swimming or not. And this kid, good swimmer, I'm talking like 23-second 50 guy, 50-second 100 guy, really, really good, and but had to stop. So I got him in the pool. He was doing a few laps, and from up top, there was a few things I saw, right? As we talked about on Thursday, he needed to lengthen out his neck. He was swimming like really, really stiff. Like I was telling him that he was trying to keep his ears warm with his shoulders. So if you can kind of picture that, like, you shrink your neck down or your chin down, and then trying to raise your shoulders up to kind of cover your ears. That's how he swam. So he was very, very limited in the mobility, and he would take his strokes. And so we worked on that. We worked on his shoulder stiffness, but then on his stroke, he looked at least from the top, from like the deck, which is, again, where you get most of your feedback, right? Whether you have a master's coach or someone watching you, or you just think you're doing what you think you're doing, which is another reason why swimming is so hard. You think you're doing one thing and you're doing another. But the shape of his arm, right? We always talk about early vertical forearm, right? So you've got your elbow and your forearm kind of bent going down as close to like 90 degrees as possible. From the surface, it looked pretty perfect. He had really long arms. He's a tall dude. And it looked like he had early vertical arms. So I was kind of stumped, besides like the shoulders, but I got some underwater footage of him, and it turns out, and I think this is probably one of the most common issues that swimmers have, especially triathletes, is that there's a huge difference in having your arm bent as one lever, meaning if you take your arm out straight, like if you're sitting here listening to this podcast right now and you take your arm, it's on down my side and you lift it straight up and it's perfectly straight, and then you do a slight bend to it. Now, it looks like it's two levers, but it's not, right? Because two levers means one lever can also move independently of another. Your shoulder to your elbow is one lever, your elbow to your wrist is another lever. But the way he was swimming, he was just swimming with the one bent lever. So again, he was reaching with his arm bent, and then he was doing his pull straight down underneath him with his arm completely just bent, with no extension backwards, no catch, no nothing. And it was just really interesting to watch, because again, he's not slow, right? He's probably faster than most people listening to this podcast, including myself. But the way he was moving, the amount of leverage and force he was generating by pushing the water down and having all that force kind of driving through his shoulder was the root cause of his actual shoulder issues. He didn't have two levers. He didn't reach. When we reach or we enter the water and when we reach, we always want our hands kind of right in front of our shoulders. And then the first thing we want to do, and I worked on this myself in the pool yesterday, is the first thing you want to do is point your fingers towards the bottom, right? Whether that's with your wrist bent already, but it's to point those fingertips towards the bottom. What that does is that drives your elbow and your forearm kind of stay high up in the water. But what it does is it drives your lower lever, right? Your elbow to your wrist down towards the bottom. And then you use that lower lever, say that 3 times fast, lower lever, lower lever, lower lever. You use your lower lever, elbow to wrist, facing the bottom, right, or your fingertips to the bottom, and then pushing backwards while your elbow, right, your elbow to your shoulder, that elbow, which is the connector of the lever 1 and lever 2, that stays on like a high plane. It doesn't collapse. So he was, again, working with just one lever. It was bent, but on surface it looked like he had early vertical form, but he wasn't using it as a vertical form. He was using it as a one bent lever. And the last thing I saw with the cue that I think has also been super helpful when coaching remotely, which you and I both do, is the cue of armpit open. And to me, I think that's probably one of the most underused cues in swimming, is that when you reach out, so if you're, again, sitting listening to this podcast, hopefully you're not driving, you're sitting in a chair somewhere, or if you are driving, you're probably a self-driving car, so it's no big deal. But you enter with your fingertips in front of your shoulders, you swing your elbow out, and then you drive your fingertips towards the bottom. Well, you can see, like right now, your armpit's wide open. Like there's a huge gap, your armpit's open, and then if you continue to move your elbow out wide, this stays open as long as possible, and you finally close on the back end. Well, what this swimmer was doing, and what I think a lot of athletes do, is they swing their elbow or their arm out wide with their bent lever, and then they actually collapse their elbow in. They're actually pushing water back with their upper arm, and their armpit collapses. It no longer stays open. It immediately closes. And if your elbow and your upper arm is closing your armpit, then you're not moving water backwards. You're moving water into you. So those are 2 cues, I think, like when we talk about swimming and the use of our levers and how we want to propel ourselves backwards and generate force, right? Not force, minimal force down, most of our force back, minimal force up. It's how we use that lever. And I think one of the biggest struggles I think most athletes have when they start swimming is how to enter the water as a single lever and how to turn it into 2, and then also to not collapse that armpit closed, which is how you ruin any kind of extension and any force.
Okay, I'm sitting over here following that in my brain, and I think I get it, but is this part of like what you're saying, we talk about stay wide, and is that the starting point? And like, I know we say that a lot, but a lot of times that means just like not cross over, because like for me, it seems like I definitely have a shoulder problem. I've had it for a long time, and I've been working. I always do stuff to, it's not unmanageable, but it definitely has something in there. And with triathlon, it's sort of this probably over and over repeated moves in the wrong way, and that kind of add up over time. So, I mean, one of my things is I do a lot of stretch cord stuff. I also like kind of focus on my bicep and stuff, because I think, we're working certain muscles and then the other ones become weak. And sometimes that's what I think the problem can be. But that's another story. What I'm asking you now is like, that open armpit, if you're reaching out, see, and that's where I get into trouble, because sometimes with my shoulder, it kind of bothers me to reach out wide, so I find myself kind of like cheating inside and under. So I'm just curious if that's kind of what you're talking about, or if I'm just misreading this.
It's a perfect question, right? Because someone was taking a video of you from a frontal view, and you're swimming down the lane, right? We always tell athletes you want to look like you're swimming like a house, right? So if again, frontal view here, obviously you can't have both arms down at the same time, but you should have your head, right? The visual of your head kind of being the apex, like the point, and then the roof is your shoulders to your elbows, right? That's slanted down, shoulder to elbow, and then the sides of the house should be your elbow to your wrists. Right, so you got that visual. You got your head is the center point. You got the roof that slants down on each side. That's your shoulder to your elbow, and then goes straight down. Right, is your elbow to your wrist. That's called swimming wide. Now, the sides of the house, again, their elbows to our wrist, can go more in. Right, there's in close enough to where the water isn't perfectly still, which makes it really hard to press and your muscles fatigue. But then there's also too far inside. Right, where your hand sweeps inside, your hand faces inside, and you come out underneath yourself. And that's, I think, one of the more common things you do see, because it's easier to pull underneath your body than it is out wide, right? And the reason is because the water is flowing underneath you versus more still out wide. Can you be too out wide? Absolutely. Like if you go too out wide, just like anything, right? It's about strength. So if you're a swimmer that swims underneath your body, right? Path of least resistance. We're all human beings. We always go path least resistance. Your arms get tired. You now come underneath your body, right? I use the analogy of, the difference in out wide water and water underneath you is the difference between walking upstairs and then walking up an escalator. Walking upstairs takes more energy because the stairs are still. They're not moving with you. And you have to generate all the power, right? Versus underneath your body is walking up the escalator that's actually going with you. So it's a lot easier, right? You have the momentum. It feels easier. If you had to pick, you would say, yes, I would walk up escalators all day long, right? Walking upstairs all day long? No, thank you. Having said that, if you are a person that pulls underneath yourself, right? And again, it's not just about being slow with the water and that you're grabbing. It's also about the trajectory now of your hand. Because if you're going to sweep underneath you, then in order to do that and you actually enter, right? And here's two different ways to look at it. If you're sitting here again in your chair and you got your elbows in front of your fingertips in front of your shoulders, and you do your catch, and then you come underneath your body. When you come underneath your body, your arm is now facing not straight backwards. Your hand isn't coming straight backwards. It's now coming to the side. So now we're wasting energy to now push less water because we're now moving water to the side, east and west. We should always be going directly behind us, which we'll call south. So now instead of moving water south, right, and creating force to drive us forward north, we're actually taking our hand and moving it east to west, which does nothing to propel us forward, which is why we went totally away from the S curve back in the day where we would enter the water with our thumb, we'd push water, east, we'd push water west, and we'd whoosh it right back around and go south. And we figured out way too late for whatever reason that just seems like a really big fucking waste of time. So let's just push water backwards and then it'll make us go forward. It's like we're trying to overthink things. Now, what you see a lot of people is they enter right there in front of their shoulder, they come out, and then they come underneath, causing themselves, one, to waste energy and time, and also against fast water. Having said that, if you go from a person who likes to come underneath their body too much and you go out wide too far, then you aren't going to have the strength to hold it. And then it becomes there's always a battle, I think, with swimmers. It's, lats versus shoulders, shoulders versus lats. Which one's going to be the primary mover? And the primary mover should always be the lats. Your lats, I mean, if you watch the best swimmers on the planet, they raise their arms to the side. It looks like they've got freaking wings. I mean, their lats are gigantic. That's their primary mover. That lat is what controls and contracts the lever. It has the tension, it brings it in, it relaxes, and it repeats over again, right? Your shoulder is a joint, right? It's got joints, it's got muscles and tendons, it's got bones. Your lat is a muscle, and you can strengthen that muscle. But if you don't have it, then what happens is again, with all things, you path of least resistance, you tend to overcompensate. And so if your lat isn't strong enough, just like using too big of paddles, right? You can't do your catch. You put too much, you don't have the strength to hold it. So then you go and start working with your shoulder. So, and that's one thing, but what you see most of the time is the reason people pull underneath themselves is because when they enter the water, they don't enter the water with their fingertips in front of their shoulders. They enter their water closer to their midline, so like their nose. And then they just bring their hands straight down. So like if you have, again, if you're sitting here and you take your hands and you put your thumbs underneath your hand and you slam your fingers together. So straight out in front of you, hands are connected. They're right in front of your nose. And then you just simply drop your hands at an angle and bring them totally underneath you. That is what most people have as a swim stroke. They over enter and crossing their midline, again, making you go crooked, and then they come straight underneath themselves. That's the least amount of force possible. The back end of that is when I talked about closing your armpit open, is you want to leave it open as long as possible. There's ways to leave it open without having your house way out wide. You can leave it open, and the reason you can leave it open is if you leave your elbow high in the water, you don't bring your elbow back to your body. So when you're swimming, next time you go swim, think about how long can I keep my elbow away from my body? Because again, this swimmer and a lot of swimmers that I've videoed, they come out wide and then they actually just bring their elbow back to them. Like back in elementary school when you try to make fart noises, that's what people do. They bring their elbow right back to their body. They are actually pushing. This is what this swimmer was doing. I got him. We got some stretch cords out and had him with two hands. And I was like, this is how we engage our lats. And he was like, this is the first time I've ever even felt the fact that I have a lat. I didn't know that I had lats. I know that you're supposed to swim with lats. I've never felt that. And so if you don't know what that feels like, then more than likely you're swimming with your shoulders and you're not using your primary movers. And at some point you are going to lose speed, get stale, or create an injury. So again, sometimes you think about how long can I keep my armpit open for? If you feel your elbow coming towards you, again, a lot of times it's just about upper body strength, but try to keep it out wide, right? And it could be slowing things down by the use of paddles. Again, to me, paddles aren't about strength all the time. They're about slowing things down, right? Because you've got a much wider surface area than your normal hand, so it takes you longer to get through the water. And if it takes you longer to get to the water, you've got more time. And if you've got more time, you can actually focus on it, right? And do it correctly versus spinning your arms as fast as possible, trying to get to where you're going with maximal effort and minimal speed. And so I think, like, again, when you're trying to focus on, again, wide but not too wide, right, is waiting as long as possible to close that armpit and just make sure your elbow isn't coming towards your body, but is extending, helping your forearm extend backwards. Does that make sense? I answer your question.
Yeah, I think so. It's always interesting to talk about this with you because, as a guy who didn't start swimming till late, I think I sort of have a different perspective sometimes, at least from I guess being confused perspective, which I think a lot of swimmers do. They think about stuff, we say stuff, but so I try to bridge the gap a little bit in my mind. I'm thinking, when you say that house analogy, for example, I think a lot of people think about it as, maybe like a ranch house and, or, something that's kind of out there getting out really, really wide and sort of, I think of it maybe more as a tall and skinny kind of like, sort of like,
East Nashville Townhouse, baby.
Yeah, like I will think wide, but I'll let my arm do what's natural. So I think it sort of lands in the middle. And to me, at least, that's when I find that I start swimming better, is when I'm thinking wide, but I'm not forcing wide. And it's like you're saying, you don't want to land, any kind of crossover stuff, but you kind of want to be out there where it's manageable. And like you're saying, if you're throwing your arm too wide, I feel like that is kind of like engaging your shoulder, at least for me. And if you want to be, I mean, it's kind of all relative too, right? As to how strong people are, maybe. And
I totally agree.
Yeah. So I think you can be out there and pull through, the dead water, but it's, if you're not really strong, like I find, like over the course of a season, for example, I find like I'm more able to do that because I'm just swimming a lot more. But if I'm not, I have to find sort of a compromise, that isn't, completely selling out, but it's getting out there to the point where I can pull a little bit more still water or whatever. And that, but like to your point about the paddles, that's always kind of been my jam, because it is one of those things where if I can slow down and really just get that feel and just kind of, especially because if we're swimming, long distance, you got to really be able to control that. I think, at least I do. And then, but I find like when I can be more under control and more relaxed and have a better stroke in general, that I can go a little, I don't have to be hammering all the time, but I go faster anyway. When I'm getting a better catch and a better pull through there. So it's very interesting. And one other thing I just want to ask about the S curve is, like, you probably remember when that was implemented. I just wonder if it started out as some kind of like, okay, put your hand in there and just get a little bit of a tweak and get a feel for the water. And then it turned into like, let's turn it into a whole stroke. Well, I love how you explain that, because yeah. And if you're talking about east-west, that's a whole, like, let's just go east-west and then go back north-south. It's kind of a weird way to think about it, because I think about swimming a lot of times as a sort of this, when I think of swimmers versus people like me, this is one of the things that goes through my head, is sort of like, I just can't always grasp the idea that I'm just swimming, into the horizon, versus I'm going to hit something, or like something has to stop. You know what I mean? It's sort of just like letting go and running forever. Like if you're in a desert and you're never going to run into a turn or anything. So there's no turns really. You're just kind of going forever. And that's just about releasing and not kind of hedging in the moment, versus, swimmers can just jump in the water and just go like forever, across the whole lake or whatever. And I think that S curve or any of those kind of movements start getting in your head and actually taking away from the point of the whole thing, which is just having momentum and going forward and getting the best, succession of strokes that you can get over and over and over. And it's just kind of weird if you're not an endurance person or a swimmer, that, because we're used to, running around and changing, direction, or even swimming in a pool. It's like, you got the wall coming up. So, but like getting in open water is just sort of one of these things. You just release it and just, because you're going to be going forever, and you don't want any like east-west shit going on. You just want to keep moving straight.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you said a lot. I'm going to try and hit on all of them because I love everything you said. Just remind me if I forget, because it's swimming and I'll go on a tangent, is to compare running strides and swimming strokes. But I agree. Like, and again, that's why swimming is so, people like to rush through it, and it's the one you should rush through the least. Like there's a point where you're too wide, and there's a point where you're too narrow. And there could be a time where you're underneath the water makes it to where you're too narrow is better, and then your underwater changes, and then it could be your too wide is too wide. Right. There's just right for everybody. And it takes practice to feel that. And I also think that's why paddles are another great tool, as long as they're the appropriate size, is that if your paddle is the correct size, and it almost doesn't allow you to go too wide, because then it's too hard. You can't go too wide with the paddle, because then you have no leverage and no strength. So you kind of automatically bring your hand back in, if they're the right size. right? If they're too small, you can probably go out. If they're way too big, you're probably going to come underneath your body anyway. Path lead. That's what I see mostly. I see people with gigantic paddles they have no business swimming with, and what they do is they just take their hands and they come right underneath their body with a horrible stroke and pull their elbow out of the water. No catch, no nothing, just got big paddles. And they wonder why they still, struggle with upper body strength. So paddles are great for just, I think, one, the visual, right? So like entering, I can see my paddle entering and I can see it coming out, my armpits open, and I don't want to be too wide. I want to be just enough wide to get to where I want to go. And it's that force and that feel. And the S curve, again, like if you, the closest thing I can get to going back to like old school S curve is everybody's favorite drill, sculling. Is getting that feel for the water. You got fins on, or you got a pull buoy on, or you're a good kicker. You got your hands out in front of you, your fingertips in front of your shoulders, and all you're literally doing is taking your hands and moving them so they face out, moving water out, turning your wrists, your hands again, and your forearm, moving water back in. That is sculling, and that is old school S curve. And it was just to feel that water on your forearm and your hand. That's it. I mean, and that's why it's such a great drill, because it allows you to feel. That's why I love like the combination of, even though people hate it because their kick is usually weak and so is their body positioning, is like the combination of like fist drill and sculling. Fist drill, you remove all sensation. You got your fingers, toes, ears, tongue, like those are your primary, like those like super, very, very sensitive, organs in our body. Well, you remove your fingers and you remove that proprioception and feel. And you're just feeling on your forearms. When you actually, open up your hands and swim, you feel like you're swimming with like 16 hands. It's the best feeling. You get all this pull and catch. That's what you're supposed to feel. All right. And then you combine that with, maybe do 25 fist drill, 25 sculling, and that's maximum feel for the water. If you can't feel the water, you can't grab it and push it backwards. And if you can't feel and push it backwards, then you're not feeling it. You're searching. You're moving left. You're moving right, you're moving left, you're moving right. You're just simply trying to find it. There is nothing else that you are doing. And then going back to what you're talking about with swimmers can swim, or excuse me, swimmers can just go long distance, is finding like the right stroke for you is also about the distance that you're going. And I think a lot of athletes, a lot of triathletes, have one swim stroke, and it's the fastest swim stroke they can possibly have because that's the only speed that they have. Versus, I think swim stroke in speed is a lot like running. Your long run stride and cadence, arm carry, foot strike, length of gait, all those things look so much different when you're running an 800-meter interval on the track than you are if you're going out an hour and a half run on the Greenway. One is long, one is powerful, one is quick, right? One is powerful. Your arm carry is pretty pronounced. You're using your whole body, versus the hour and a half long run for most people when you're trying to keep your heart rate lower. It's a shuffle, baby, right? You're like barely, you're like, if I come across a quarter, I'm going down. My feet are that low to the ground. I'm just trying to shuffle. I'm probably going down today. I almost never have athletes like trip during speed work. They always trip on like a long run. Like they're just not picking up their feet now. If your stroke, everything changes. And I think it's important to like figure that out and to have those different feels. Like I was doing this. So one of my goals for the decade or whatever is to swim 100 free under 55 seconds, which that's going to take a lot of work. But anyway, yesterday I was in the pool and all I did, which again, is why so many triathletes I think struggle with swimming, because they're in such a hurry to get out of the water. They just want to get it done, and all they're doing is committing and dedicating time to being the same. That's it. That's all you should think about when you go. For most people, when they go to the pool, all you should think about is I'm dedicating this time out of my day to staying the same. I'm embracing mediocrity and the inability to change and be specific about details. So I got in the water, I warmed up for a second. I was like, I'm just going to do 25s and 50s. That's all I'm going to do today. And all I'm going to do is try to figure out small adjustments in my stroke, whether it's fingertip towards the bottom, which I found to be very, very beneficial. I would drop like a second per 25 every time I felt like I was not overextending, but getting my arm out just enough to where, because what I have the tendency to sometimes overreach. And when I do that, my fingertips in my hand, they start out even with my shoulder, but then you can kind of see my fingertip come up a little bit as I'm waiting to then start my catch. So that's negative, right? I'm pausing and putting the brakes on. And I had the tendency to do this on my cue for those 25s. Was all right. I'm swimming, 18, 17, 18 second 25s. I'll see if I can drop a second off a 25 just by focusing on my entry and immediately getting my fingertips towards the bottom. So that worked. But I could not, for the life of me, with my regular stroke, get down, because I'm thinking, dude, how in the hell are you going to swim, a sub 30, 50, and then how are you going to get close to 5,500 this year if you can't break 16, 17 in a freaking 25, right? And so I thought, all right, well, what I do know is that if you watch like the Olympic level swimmers, the guys that do like the 50, they have no stroke, no elbow bend. Their arms just move as fast as humanly possible, almost in a windmill, because at that point, it's all about turnover, all about turnover. And so I was like, all right, let's just throw elbow and levers to the side for a second, and let's just move our arms as quick as possible, as fast as possible while we're grabbing as well. And if you watch them, underwater video of like, Caleb Dressel or these like amazing 50-yard, 100-yard guys, they into the water almost with their fingertips already facing the bottom. Like they look like a crane. Like it's wild to watch them. I was like, let's try this. So I did 25 and it went well. And then I was like, all right, took for rest. And then I did a 50 off the wall and managed to sneak in a 27, which for me is pretty good. So I think I can actually do like a 55 second 100 this year. But all I did was focus on the fastest turnover possible. And that was it. No catch, no pull, no nothing. Fast turnover, and then as much kicking as possible. That stroke is a total night and day stroke from what I would use if I swam a 1,500 or even a 200. Totally different stroke. And so like when you think about perfecting strokes and perfecting feel, you got to think about what's required to go at your maximum, pace, maximum velocity versus what you're going to do long course. If I was trying to do an Ironman this year, I wouldn't be worried about how I looked or worried about doing a 50 free, because it's a totally different stroke, totally different cadence, totally different kick, totally different breath rate. It's like a totally different sport compared to what I would look like doing a mile or 2.4. Those are long and strong, efficient strokes. I'm maximizing leverage. My breath rate is more in control. You look totally different. And so not just like the swimming with gears is hugely important, but just finding out what stroke works best for what speeds is just, I think, is a very integral part of how you develop over time as a swimmer, because certain things feel different. And I think, again, as speaking to you as a guy who didn't grow up swimming year round, like that is the feel I think that's hardest to come by. Is you've got people who move their arms within the water, and then there are people who are able to use their arms, their hands, or arms to use water to get to where they want to go. In order to do that, you have to feel the water. Yes, if you just move your arms within the water, you are ultimately going to at least move a little bit forward. But it's being able to grab the water. In order to grab the water, you got to feel it first. You can't go grab a shirt off the hanger to put on for the day if you don't feel it first. You feel it, then you grab it. Okay, you can't just, I think I'll just pull this out of thin air. Not going to happen. So you got to feel it and then grab it. And I think that, to me, that disconnect in getting athletes in swimmers, once they've got the head position, they've got their body position correctly, to then feel the water. Once you've felt it, and then once you know how to engage what you're supposed to engage, then that cue is great, because now you know when you're not feeling it, and if you're not feeling it, then it's wrong. Or what can I do to get back there? And I think that's why so many people struggle with the swim portion. Is one, they didn't grow up doing it, right? But we also didn't grow up doing triathlon, most of us. But if you take the time and commit to doing, like I spent, I think 50 minutes in the pool to just do a 1,500, but I figured a lot of things out that I can then take into my next one. If I wanted to rush through that 1,500, I would have swam it straight, and I'd have been out of the pool in 22 minutes. So it took me over twice the time. But I got better. It just took me twice the time. Most people just want to get in and swim the whole way and stay the way that they are. And so, again, like, I'm not here to tell you it's easy. I'm not here to tell you it takes less time. I'm not here to give you a hack. I'm not here to embrace the shortcut. I'm just saying that it's 100% worth it to invest in yourself and that time to become more efficient and to have that breakthrough than to continue to beat your head against the wall and figure out. I mean, most of the time the answer is right in front of you. You're not getting better because you're not changing anything. And at some point, swimming to me is a lot like people that self-coach and only go out and run one speed. And swimming's the same way. If you want to get better, you have to run different speeds. You got to go really, really hard and really, really chill, and occasionally run race pace. But people who go out all the time and run race pace on the bike or the run, they never get any better, and they get burnt out and they start to decline in their performance. And that's what I'd probably say 80% of triathletes, they just get in, they want to get the swim over with, swim at the same pace, the same time, the same way. And all you're doing is continually distancing how you allocate your strength. You're continuing to allocate it heavier to what you don't want to, so then that becomes even more dominant than with the last time you swam. So when you do decide to fix it, or you do get an injury, then it's going to take you even longer to get that feel and strengthen the area that you've been neglecting, because when you go to isolate something, it's the primary strength provider is always going to be number one. It's going to move its ass to the front of the line and say, oh, I know you want to work them last day, but man, my shoulder's been working pretty good. I'm going to take control here. And you can't feel your lats and then you keep swimming, and you keep swimming harder, and you keep swimming harder, and you keep swimming longer. So one day your sort of like, listen, man, I don't know where the miscommunication happened, but I know I said I was fine doing this, but this is too much. You've been working me too hard. I don't do overtime. I'm out. I'm taking a 2-week break, put my notice in, I'm down. And then you're screwed. And then you have to relearn it. So no matter how far you are in your journey with swimming and feeling things or not feeling things, if you slow things down and you take the time to fix it, I think that there's obviously a benefit there. And then the last thing you said was talking about, I think it would be awesome to find out a way to see like what stroke rate and what stroke position, like hand position in the water, and like where you pull, like what allows you to hold that the longest before it deteriorates the most. Like, is it maybe coming slightly inside underneath you and you're able to hold that for a long period of time and it's still fast, versus coming out wide and only being able to hold it for 400 or 500 meters, and then it's not on point, then it's just way underneath you, and then you start to bleed time. So I would love to, if that was even possible, like to find a way where you could have somebody swim 1,000 and just watch their stroke rate change from, force down, force back, force up. Probably looks great for the first 200, but then you probably see it more and more losing that backward power, which is what we need to go fast. But yeah, that was all the feedback. And I feel like I remembered everything I wanted to say.
That was good. Well, I love what you said about working on your 50 and 100 versus, like longer swims, because in describing it, it's literally two different sports. Because when you think about, track, everybody's running or whatever, but the 100-meter versus the marathon or 5,000 meters, whatever. I mean, we all want to look like Ben Johnson and over Dave Waddle, right? But these these bodies are getting created differently. I mean, it is a different sport, and sprinting, and like you were talking about, you don't want to necessarily train as much, right, for that short distance, but you want to have that, you want to be able to raise that ceiling and create that. But I think about, when I think about paddles, for example, and I think that's an interesting point I want to make in this podcast, is that I think everybody defaults to swim with paddles, you'll just be a stronger swimmer. But like you're saying, they're just really a great way to kind of pace and understand how, create your stroke, because you can't get too wide or it's be too hard, all these kind of things. I think it's a great indicator and a great way to sort of find that real good long distance stroke. And there's just so many little things in there that are just so interesting to me, because we have to obviously, because people want to, they all judge their speed in the water on their 100, or whatever. A lot of people do that in the sports. They'll say that's the the top speed, and that's what they're resonating with. But that has shit to do with an Ironman. It's got something to do with it, but you know what I mean? As far as I can swim 100 and whatever, 140, and then to think about doing that for 4,400s continual is like, you know, that's like a recipe for disaster, or at least disappointment. And I think back to two things that, you know, you're talking about swimming at one speed and just kind of doing it, or running at one speed. And that's just what you're going to be, right? That to me is like it's like, I need to build confidence to know that I can actually swim this distance versus I want to get faster or whatever. And I think back to, I think it was like, you know, my last couple, Ironman. One I trained in the pool all the time, and I was going hard and going back and forth and taking breaks and going long distance, spending a lot of time in the pool. And then last year, I pretty much got in the lake. And I think that's a thing too with open water, is it's difficult to, you know, unless you're super conscious of, you know, trying to go harder, because you're not getting the time, right? You have no idea. You think you're going harder or whatever, but it's difficult to change efforts. It's not difficult, but if you're swimming in open water, you're kind of thinking about open water and just kind of getting to where you need to go versus actually working on swimming harder. And that's one thing I like to do, is maybe every 50 strokes or whatever, I'll pick up for 50. And I do that sometimes, but I don't think I do it enough. But my point is, when I was working in the pool and working real hard, I think my time was maybe like 4 minutes faster at Wisconsin, but the reality was I felt a lot better getting out too. So I made up 4 minutes, because not only that, you're dealing with people, contact, and, you know, not maybe swimming the perfect, the perfect route and going longer. You know, there's all kind of factors like that. So I think it ultimately comes down to, like, you know, you're saying, is just, you got to, you know, work harder, in shorter bits and stuff like that. And, you know, kind of create different gears. And I do think that's very difficult for people who swim late, but I'm always thinking about it, but probably not enough.
No, I mean, it sounds like you're thinking about it plenty. And the last cue or piece of advice we'll give you guys today about paddles is, that is, like, to me, you know, a lot of people are obsessed with, like, you know, distance per stroke. So how many strokes it takes you to get in the pool. And that's a big effortless swimming thing. I'm, you know, hugely against that, because it's about going fast. Most people just create bad habits and they take that as like going slowly. Having said that, I think a great a way to find out your best stroke, right? Stroke and body position is no buoy, but straight paddles, is to push off the wall and challenge yourself. Right. I'm going to make it to the other end in 6 strokes, 8 strokes, 13 strokes. And then again, no over gliding, constant stroke. And then what happens when people do that is they really focus on their high body position in the water, because they want to be as hydrodynamic as possible. And then they focus on the best, most powerful, and longest stroke. That is swimming. And when they do that, and you challenge them, like, all right, you can really see them pay attention to how things work. And if you swim a length and you're like, all right, I'm gonna go 12 this time, and you go 13, 14, you're like, oh, I had this stroke for 13, 14. Let me see if I can start my catch, get my fingers down a little bit earlier. Let me see if I can keep the palm of my hand facing the back of the wall, or the back wall, a little bit longer, and see if that gets me there. And you do it next time, and you drop like a stroke and a half. All right, well, that worked. Now you're faster, because you're more efficient. You did less work, right? Every time you do a stroke, it is work. And so you do that, and now you're getting less work. Now, all right, now let me see if I can get down to, let me see, get out one more stroke. And that's with everything. Like, it doesn't matter what stroke it is, or with, you know, most things with life, right? It's about efficiency. And it's about playing with, like, the cadence. And, like, last little story is, like, I was working with a breaststroker, and they looked like they were bobbing every 2 seconds. They were rushing through their stroke, which is very much a triathlete. And so we timed him. I said, all right, I want you to give me your fastest 50 and give me your RPE, and I'm going to count how many stroke cycles you go through. And so we did that, and he gave me his time, and his RPE was like a 7 or an 8, and we got his time and his cadence. And then I said, all right, now I want you to swim at 25, and I want you to really focus on power, and it's okay to glide. It's not okay to stall. So don't be in a hurry. So we did that, and it was, I think, 4 less stroke cycles, a 1.5 seconds faster, and a lower RPE. So obviously a huge win. But I think we get in this, again, like, we can't say this enough, like, swimming is one of those things where the harder you work, the slower you usually go with more and more effort. And so there are ways to slow things down, to find these, like you were saying, I think earlier, is like to find these pockets of positive, not just performance, but like these small little wins. Like, hey, I feel like I learned something today, and maybe you didn't learn it as like a retention thing you can explain to someone, but if you learned it as in a way that you can now feel it versus you didn't feel it before, then that's a win. And it does. And I'm telling you right now, like if you're struggling with swimming, the best thing for you to do is to try something that makes you feel like you're swimming weird. Is to just swim and it doesn't feel awkward. You're doing the same thing. Because usually when you make like a huge adjustment in swimming, it's going to feel really, really, really weird because you're now moving your arms differently, or you're feeling water a different way, or your timing is a little bit off. And I know that's disconcerting and probably frustrating and somewhat scary for people who have been working so hard. They're afraid to give up their below average, mediocre, back of the pack swim for a couple of weeks of uncertainty and maybe regression to get 3 or 4 months down the road to now be a front of the pack swimmer. Like, and I think that's, with most things in life, like we're scared to take that leap. We're scared to take that risk to do something bigger and better because we're so very, very comfortable in our mediocrity, in our level of fine. And so I would just, again, it's just March. Challenge yourself.
March Madness in the pool.
March Madness in the pool, baby.
All right. Well, I think there's got to be something in there, man.
Yeah, and it'll probably take you guys all week to let this marinate. So we'll come back at you next week. As always, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com, and is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. Or if you need anything from me, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, man. Go Vols. Let's
go Patrick.
Yeah, we'll see you next week, but
and we'll see the Final Four.
Yeah, we'll have to meet in the Final Four. How's that sound?
Yeah, baby. I love it.
All right, man.
See you, dude.
See you.